chapter 23. Just a little thought provoker tonight. In verse 5, 23:5, wilt thou set thine eyes upon that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings, and they fly away as an eagle toward heaven. Isn't that a strange verse? Strange verse. Strange verse. Have you ever observed something from a distance, and then when you got closer, it wasn't what you thought it was? Life is like that. Especially if you're my age and older. You've seen a lot and been through a lot. And it's sometimes hard for you to endure the ignorance of the young because you were once as ignorant as they are. And it's hard for you to be that and know what they're thinking or what they're doing, and it isn't what they think it is. But somehow or another you can't make them understand that. I remember as a young preacher when I started out here, and I used to often vision in 20 years what the church would look like. And when I got to that point, it wasn't what I thought it was at all. Maybe you can look back in your life and you can say, here's what you visioned when you turned 65 or turned 70 or 72. Here's what you envisioned. I said to a man one time, I said, when you planned your retirement, did you plan for this? And he went, no. I said to Brother Roy Wilcox one time, I said, brother, I said, did you imagine when you built this house and put this stairs to go up, the stairway to go upstairs to his room, did you imagine there'd be a day you wouldn't be able to climb them? He said, I never gave it a thought. So things aren't always what they seem. The trouble with us humans is that we have a tendency to believe everything we see. Now here's an old adage, and it really doesn't work anymore with Photoshop. My mother used to say, Paul, don't believe anything you hear and only half of what you see. And there's still some truth there. Don't believe anything you hear and only half of what you see. And with Photoshop, I don't know if you can believe anything you see.
Yeah, amen.
I mean, you can make a preacher hold a cat. As a matter of fact, Dan, I have a note here that says, show picture Dan made, and I forgot to bring it with me.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it was. It looks real. I want to just try to explain a few things to you here tonight, help you understand some things. I'll just give you some examples, and we're not really going to get anything deep or not. But let's turn to 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel. I couldn't get anything deep anyways because I'd probably drowned. And 17, 1 Samuel 17, of course, that book and that number will tell you where we're going, where it should. Verse 40 says, speaking of David, and he took his staff in his hand and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook and put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had even in a scrip, and his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. And the Philistine came on and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy and of fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, am I a dog? And I think right there David could have said, yeah. Am I a dog that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. That's always a bad thing. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give thy flesh to the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into my hand, and I will smite thee and take thy head from thee, and I will give the carcass of the host of the Philistines this day to the fowls of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, and all the earth may know, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with the sword and with the spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. Amen. And it came to pass when the Philistine arose, he was sitting down, taking it easy, enjoying his peanut butter sandwich, and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hastened and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. There was a gutless boy right there. The Goliath had to get up. David just took off running right toward him. And you got to imagine, if you have any imagination, all you've got to look at this army of Philistines, and they're looking at each other going like, what's this kid doing? He's going to take all of us on with a sling? Like, come on. And David put his hand in his bag and took thence a stone and slang it. That's southern for. And smote the Philistine in his forehead, and the stone sank into his forehead. Now I want to tell you something. That stone had to come off of that sling at a pretty good, how many feet per second? It's probably like a 308 coming out of there. I mean, you might hit stone and knock somebody, but to sink it into the forehead, you know what it takes to go through the bone right there in your forehead? Which tells you that the Goliath was so sure of himself, he didn't even have his helmet on. Because if he had his helmet on, there was a nose guard piece that came down here. And the reason they had a nose guard piece is because you can kill somebody by ramming their nose or hitting them here, splitting that. It just goes into your brain, you're dead. So if you take all this in consideration, here's David out there, and he's got a sling, and he's got 5 stones, and 4 of them was for Goliath's other brothers. And he's running toward this army. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of Philistines out there. And here's this giant, and this little boy is running toward him. That must have chuckled the giant. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him, and there was no sword in the hand of David. And we won't go on anymore. Here's what I want you to see. Goliath didn't see the giant he was fighting. He thought it was a boy. But he was fighting God. Things aren't always what they appear to be. To Goliath, this was a couple minutes' work, and it was over, and they'd have Israel as their slaves, and this would be over. He didn't see who was really there to fight for David. Now, the Lord used David, no doubt about that. But I've always had some sneaking suspicion, because I'm this way. I've always had some sneaking suspicions the Lord just pushed that stone a little harder. And you're not told here how close he got to the giant before he let the thing go. He could have been standing from here to them post right there, and sure, at that speed with that sling coming around, I imagine that stone come out of there pretty good. But what Goliath didn't see was the other giant. And I think as Christians, we often miss the other giant. We don't see God in the mix. And sometimes God is in it more than you think he is.
That's right.
God does greater things than we think he does. God is in the taking down the giants business.
Yes, sir.
But he wants us to have a backbone.
That's right.
He wants us to stand up sometime and say something when it needs to be said. Otherwise, sit down and shut up. But sometimes it needs to be said. And David says, who's going to go out here? And his brother said, certainly not you. And David said, look, it's not that he defied Israel, but he defied our God. And I was thinking maybe sometimes when our God gets defied, maybe it's time for us to say, hey, that's my Father, that's my God you're talking about.
Amen.
I'd appreciate it if you didn't talk that way. So consider this. Things aren't always what they appear to be. I wonder if at that moment it hit him in the head and he sank down. I wonder if he had enough life left in him to wonder, how did this happen? How could a little boy run out here and whoop me? Well, it was more than the little boy. It was the God of the Israelite. It's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we have him on our side. Of Abraham Lincoln, I believe it was, that said this: I'm not so interested if God's on our side. I just want to be sure I'm on his side.
Amen.
We want God on our side, but look, we just don't want to be on his side all the time. Turn to Judges, chapter 7. Judges chapter 7. We are talking tonight about this verse, wilt thou set thine eyes upon that which is not, for riches certainly make themselves wings, they fly away as an eagle toward heaven. And listen, I don't want to be unkind to people, but it's only those who have spent their life raising a family and paying out the goods that understands that term and understands what it means for that to fly away. You get your paycheck and you think, wow, I got my paycheck. And you know this is the week you don't have anything extra until you get your paycheck. And then a tire goes flat. The pump quits working. The hot water heater goes out. There's always something to make your money fly away. Okay? Because why? Because things aren't always what they appear to be. Judges 7, verse 16. And he divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he put a trumpet in every man's hand, and the empty pitchers and lamps within the pitchers. And he said unto them, look on me, and do likewise. And behold, when I come to the side of the camp, it shall be that as I do, you shall do. So this is like, follow the leader. Whatever I do, you do. When I blow with the trumpet, I and all that are with me, then blow ye the trumpets also on every side of the camp, and say, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. So Gideon and the 100 men that were with him came to the outside of the camp in the beginning of the middle watch, and they had but newly set the watch. And they blew the trumpets and brake the pitchers that were in their hands. And the 3 companies blew their trumpets and brake the pitchers and held the lamps in their left hand and the trumpet in their right hand to blow withal. And they cried, the sword of the Lord and of Gideon. Now I've tried over the years in my mind to picture that. That had to be an unusual tactic. What they had was pitchers with lamps in them and trumpet. And you're going to battle against an army with a trumpet and a lamp. Now, modern strategists would say, you couldn't do anything more dumb than that. But might I remind you, things that are not what they appear to be. Gideon defeats the Midianites, an army that looked like grasshoppers for the multitude. So we're talking about 10,000? I don't know. Against 300 men who didn't have a sword? Who didn't have a machine gun? They didn't have the top Marine on their side. They didn't have the SEALs. Didn't have the Green Beret. And 300 men. Why? Because things don't always appear to be what they are. I don't have any idea what it's like to be woke up at the third watch, early morning. I don't have any idea whether to be woke up like that by the scream of 300 men, the sword of the Lord and a Gideon, and all you see is lamps and pictures and trumpets going off. You understand that when God attacks, he doesn't go the normal route.
That's right.
He doesn't do what's normal.
Amen.
God always does, to some extent, what's seemingly abnormal to you and me, but yet it's normal to God. Why? Because he can do anything he wants at any point in time. These, you think there were, when the Lord had them, lap up the water and pick the water up and cup it in their hands, and that's how he picked out his 300 men. And first of all, he sent some back that didn't want to, and then he sent these fellows back. And he took, 10,000 men and coned it down to 300? And took those 300 men and went in there without a sword, without a machine gun, without a machete, without a cannon, without strafing from F-16s, and defeated the enemy. Why? Because things are not always what they seem to be. I'm glad for a God that one time he spits in somebody's eye, tells them so they can see. Next time he gets some dirt and puts it in there. He never does things the same. You can't get bored with a God who does things different all the time. You find a God who never does things the same. It's kind of like God setting up in heaven going, let's try this. He knows the outcome, but he wants to do something different. The walls of Jericho didn't fall in, they fell out.
Amen.
If you read it, they fell out. And for years, people said, no, there's no way they could have fallen out, until the archaeologists dug up a wall and found out it fell out. But they wouldn't take God's word for it. See, it wasn't an implosion, it was an explosion. God always does that which seems the impossible thing to do. Second Kings 3. Okay, what did I say? Yeah, okay. verse 16, chapter 3. And this is Elisha, and he said, thus saith the Lord, make thee valleys full of ditches. For thus saith the Lord, ye shall not see wind, neither shall you see rain, yet the valleys will be filled with water, and ye may drink both ye and your cattle and your beast. And this is but a light thing in the sight of the Lord. He will deliver the Moabites unto you, also unto your hand. And ye shall smite every fenced city and every choice city, and shall fell down every good tree, and stop the wells of water, and mar every good piece of property with stone, or piece of land with stones. And it came to pass in the morning, when the meat offering was offered, that behold, there came water by the way of Edom, and the country was filled with water. That's just amazing to me. They got up in the morning to do that, and the water just came. Probably the same God was in charge of that as he was at the flood, huh? Amen. When all the Moabites heard that the kings were come up to fight against them, they gathered all they were able to, put armor and upward, and stood in the border. And they rose up early in the morning, and the sun rose upon the water, and the Moabites saw the water on the other side as red as blood, and they said, This is blood. And the kings are surely slain, and they are smitten one of another. Now, therefore, Moab to the spoil. And of course, you know what happened when they went into the spoil. Say, what's that about? Things aren't always what they seem to be. Here's a bunch of kings standing up on the hill, and they're looking down that valley and saying, Look at all that blood. They killed each other. We'll just go down and take the spoil and go home. It wasn't what it appeared to be. When they got there, they got whooped. Why? Because God does things. And you remember when they were on the road to Emmaus, and he said he made their eyes holden so they wouldn't recognize who he was?
Right.
Now, I want to ask you a question. How do you think that happened? How did they have eyesight to see to walk and see to talk and look at one another, but they couldn't see who they were looking at? But think about that a minute. You have a God that there's nothing that he can't do. We sing that song, but there isn't. There's nothing he can't do. There's no impossible task for God, only impossible for you and me. Do you know how long it would took them to dig the valleys and get enough water to fill those ditches? Lord said, just make some ditches out. Don't worry, I'll take care of the water. It'll be there when we need it. And it's just like in the, let's see here. Oh, verse 20. And behold, there came water by the way of Edom. Well, you know where Edom is, right? That's Esau. That's the bottom of the Dead Sea. Salt Sea. So where'd the water come from? Best you can do is God, ain't it? So here's a bunch of kings standing up on the hill, Moabites, and they're looking down there and they're going like, man, they killed themselves. Let's go down and get all the goodies and we'll take them home to the missus. They never got home. Because when they got down there, it wasn't a bunch of ditches full of blood. It was a bunch of ditches full of water, and Israel was waiting for them. They think they're going to kill the Israelites, and they end up giving their own life. Go a couple more chapters up there. Here, go to chapter 6, verse 11. Now, there's more detail than I'm giving you this stuff. I'm just giving you something for you to lap on, all right?
Amen.
And when you read through there, see if you can't pick out something. That's what I like about the Bible, is every time I read it, I pick out something new somewhere.
That's right.
So they never see that before. That's why I love this book. Verse, did I say chapter 6?
Yes.
Okay, verse 11. Therefore, the heart of the king of Syria was sore troubled for this thing. Well, you'd have to go back and read it, and I don't want to take time to read all of it. You'll get the point here in a minute. And he called his servants and said unto them, Will ye not show me which of us is for the king of Israel? Because every time he went to do something, the king of Israel already knew about it. So he figures he's got a snitch, a government informer, a double spy. And one of his servants said, None, my lord, O king, but Elisha the prophet that is in Israel telleth the king of Israel the words which thou speakest in thy bedchamber. That's a bad thought right there. Be careful what you say, huh? Somebody might be listening in. Don't you live in the age? Y'all want to do something interesting? Most of you got internet. Just type in there Hitler's books that were banned. You'll get the shocker of your life when you begin to read that. See, we talk about the book burnings when they burnt the Bibles and all the books back in Rome for the Christians. But Hitler burned every book he could get his hand on that didn't support the German. Anything written by a Jew or anything written about the Jews was burnt. They estimated it in the 12 years that he was leader there, they burned over 4,000 books. Let you know what's going on in America, okay? And I don't know if you know this or not, but Dr. Seuss came back from the dead and rewrote 4 books, and now they say you can't read them now. Michelle Obama read them, and they were pretty good, I guess. And he said, go and spy where he is, that I may send and fetch him. That's an old down southern term, fetch it. And it was told him, saying, behold, he is in Dothan. Therefore sent he hither horses and chariots and great host, and they came by night and compassed the city about. And when the servant of the man of God was risen early and gone forth, behold, a host compassed the city with horses and chariots. And the servant said unto him, alas, my master, how shall we do? And he said, fear not. Is that confidence or what? You know what he knew? He already knew they were out there. Listen, if he knows what you're saying in your bedchamber, then he already knew they were coming. He wasn't caught off guard. So he said, alas, my master, how shall we do? And he answered, fear not, for they that be with us are more than they that be with them. Now stop. Not a person in this room believes that. And yet there's more with you than there is of them. At any point in time in your Christian life, there's more on your side than there is against you. You just can't see them. So not everything that you see is what it is. He says, and Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes. Now see, there's that thing again. And I keep asking myself, how does he open your eye? This young man standing there, and he's talking to Elisha. He can see Elisha. He can see the horses out there, but he can't see something. So there's not just 3 dimensions. There's 4 dimensions. You can get that in Ephesians chapter 2. 4 divisions. 4. So there's a dimension you and I can't see. And you know why you know there's a 4th dimension? Because all these young people that get off on these drugs end up seeing things you can't see. When I was security guard there at the hospital, I'd see those drunks. They'd bring them drunks in there, and they'd have to strap them to the table. And then a cop would come out here and say, could you come in here and watch this guy while I talk to these people? I said, sure. I'd go in there, and that guy would be screaming. And I'd say, what's your problem? Get them spiders out of here. I said, what spiders? He said, them big spiders. I said, there's no spiders in here. Yes, there are, and they're crawling on me. Get them off of me. I said, there's no spiders on you. But he was seeing something I wasn't seeing. I'm glad. And you run into those drug addicts that say something like this, and Seth had run into it at the hospital. We won't hurt you. And there's only one of them. What do you mean we? Where's this we person at? So there's a dimension you can't see. Right now, what's going on in the air is radio and TV signals you can't see. There's ham operator signals going through this church building right now. You just can't see them. If you have a frequency finder and you pick it up, you can pick them up. But the Lord didn't make your brain to pick those frequencies up. You'd go mad. So what happens when you take those drugs, it alters that pattern. That's why Art Linkletter's daughter jumped out of a 10-story building and thought she was a bird. She could fly. So there's a dimension that you can't see. In order for to do that, God has to do, we call it a miracle. God has to do something. He said, Lord, open his eyes so he can see. And when the eyes got open, he went, whoa. What shall we do? Shall we kill him? So things that you see aren't always what they are. I hope you're getting it. There's things going on you can't see. And as you go through this book, you see it more and time again. Something like that takes place. They begin to see things. And you remember when the Lord opened that man's eyes and he said, what do you see? He said, I see men walking as trees. I've always thought, step back and go, okay, Lord, I'm not pretending I had knowledge of everything, but what do you mean he saw men walking as trees? When did trees start walking? And so the Lord touches him, and now he sees, oh, okay, Lord, I see it now. And I wondered, I didn't mean anything wrong here, Lord. But I just wondered if the Lord went, whoops, went a little bit too far. Went a little too far on that one. So you know what? What you don't know is this, that when you were made in the image of God, and you had the capability, if you go to Genesis chapter 7, Genesis chapter 11, you have the capabilities of doing just about anything. And God said, if I don't stop them, they'll take this tower all the way to heaven. And when sin came, God closed off some of your abilities. Didn't he say that man has become as we? Isn't that what God said? You go read it. Man has become as us. What's that mean? That means that there's things that you can't see now because your mind couldn't. If God took you to heaven right now and just in the body you're in right now and just set you down and said, look around, you'd blow a gasket. Why? Your brain can't handle that. Sin brought a stoppage to a lot of things that we can't do anymore. And I'm glad. I'd be a nutcase. I see things I don't want to see now. All right, 2 Kings 7. Let's get one more in here. 2 Kings 7, verse 4. If we say we will enter into the city, and the famine is in the city, and we shall die there, and if we sit still here, these are those lepers, you remember? We shall stay here, we die also now. Therefore, come, let us fall into the host of the Syrians. If they save us alive, we shall live. If they kill us, we shall but die. And they rose in the twilight to go to the camp of the Syrians, and when they come to the uttermost part of the camp of the Syrians, there was no man there. For the Lord had made a host of the Syrians to hear a chariots and horses, noise of horses, even the noise of a great host. And they said one to another, lo, the king of Israel hath hired against us the kings of the Hittites and the kings of the Egyptians to come up on us. Therefore they arose and fled to the twilight and left their tents and their horses and their asses in the camp as it was, and fled in their lives. And when the lepers came to the uttermost part of the camp, they went to the tents and did eat and drank and carried away the silver and the gold and the raiments and went and hid it and came again and entered into another tent and carried also, and so forth and so on. So here's the Syrians, they got the Israel surrounded, and they haven't got anything left. I mean, all the food's gone, everything's happening, and these lepers are outside the gate there, and they're going like, man, we're going to die sitting here. We might as well go give ourselves up to the Syrians and get something to eat, and they'll kill us, but so what? We're going to die here. We're not going to get back in the city. So they head out there. And when they get out there, they go, where is everybody? And unbeknownst to them, the whole Syrian army heard chariots and horses. Don't tell me the Lord doesn't have a broadcast system. Because things aren't as what they appear to be. Why? Well, to those Syrians, they thought the Egyptians and the Hittites were after them, and the Egyptians and the Hittites, they're sitting home getting drunk, and they don't even know what's going on. Here these people are running away from something that isn't even there. I don't mind running away from things I know are there, but don't you feel kind of foolish when you turn around and look and there's nothing there?
Yeah. When I was a kid.
So what are you trying to say, preacher? I'm just trying to say things don't always appear to be what they are.
Yeah, amen.
And sometimes we make a bigger deal out of something than what it really is. You know why? Because you can't see it, you can't hear it, you can't feel it, and you just think there's nothing there. You have felt rejected. You have often felt alone. You have even thought at times that God had forsaken you. Why? Because things aren't always what they appear to be. We think when something goes wrong, God must not be in it. God was in every one of those things that took place here tonight. As a matter of fact, the truth of it is, God's the one that instigated them.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that transpires in your life or transpires in my life that God isn't a part of it. Whether he instigated it, if I can use that word, or whether it just happens, that's the way life turned out for you, God's there and he knows. And sometimes we need to sit back and say, okay, God, I guess maybe I needed another set of eyes to look at this thing. And maybe God will give you the answer inside the book that he uses to give answers with. Let me close out here. David wrote in Psalm 62:10, "Trust not in oppression, become not vain in robbery. If riches increase, set not your heart upon them." Why? Because they aren't what you think they are. That doesn't mean that you can't have money. That doesn't mean that you couldn't be a millionaire. It simply means don't. Paul said to charge them that are rich that they trust in the living God, not in their riches. It's all right to have the riches, but don't trust them to be the answer to everything that goes on in life. He's talking tonight about that young girl that had that cancer on the back of her leg. Only four cases, did you say? Only 4 cases known of in the United States. Sister Bonnie's got a cancer that only less than 1% of the people, women in the country, get it. And all the money in the world won't fix those. That's what that fellow told me years ago about his daughter. He offered Mayo Clinic, I forget how many $1,000, if they would just investigate and find a cure for his daughter's rare lung cancer. And they said, if we couldn't get it done in the time you need it. All the money he had, sell his business if he had to, hawk it to the highest port to do that, wouldn't save a thing. Why? Because riches aren't the answer. They're not what they appear to be. Again, I'm not saying if somebody mails you $1 million, I'm not saying you throw it in the waste can and say, I ain't doing that because that's bad. I'm not saying that. I'm saying is don't set your eyes on it. Oh, all of my problems are solved. It may be that all your problems are just now beginning. Because what they tell me is that most rich people, if you get rich, you suddenly get rich, you got to change your phone number, your address, and everything else. Why? Because all of a sudden now you're known by, you don't know who you're known by. Your phone calls coming in and people dropping stuff up at your house, and you're getting the letter from somebody whose house got broken into and all their stuff got stolen, want to know if you can help them out. I'm just saying is that isn't the answer. It's not wrong to have it, it's just not the answer. And you got to get your mind off of that, thinking that's going to solve all my problems, when most of the time all it does is make problems. Listen to this. But as it is written, eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither hath entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared for them that love him. You got more waiting for you than you could have imagined if you even tried. And it hasn't anything to do with your riches on this earth. It has everything to do with God's riches in heaven. Isn't that what he said? Philippians chapter 4, isn't that what he said? You're there. Amen? Amen. Lord, thank you for your book. Thank you for the truths relevant in there and revealed to us. And Lord, I'll be honest with you, some of those stories I read tonight, it's not that I don't believe them, Lord. It's just, man, it's just beyond my imagination. But I'm thankful that I've got a God who isn't stopped by the difficult things of life. As a matter of fact, that's where he begins to work. And so help us all to trust you more than we do. Ask you safety for the